Sylvia and me.
Sylvia and
Sylvia and me. Sylvia and
Sylvia. Sylvia and me.
Sylvia.
So much of ageism is discrimination and bias on the basis of age, and which is both, like all bias, embedded in systems around us and carried around between our ears.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Beckerman, host of the podcast series Sylvia and Me. Conversations with inspiring, empowering women.
My name is Ashton Applewhite. Believe it or not, I am an author and pro-aging advocate. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I am on something of a crusade with more help all the time to improve the way we think about aging and to look at the reasons why we are so apprehensive about it and to challenge those forces. And welcome to Sylvia.
And me. Thank you so much for joining me today. The name of your book is This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism, which is perfect. Absolutely perfect. You said you're an author, you're an advocate against ageism, you're a recognized leader in the field of healthy aging. You've been recognized by various major media outlets like the New York Times, the New Yorker, NPR, the American Society of Aging as an expert on ageism. And your viral TED Talk titled Let's End Ageism is hitting, what, about 2 million viewers or more?
I think it's either pushing 2 million or 3 million, but as you can tell, I don't track it very careful. I'm not trying to inflate it if it's 2 million.
I mean, what's a million here or there?
It's something 0.9. We'll get, these things, it's slow. It's a slow business, but there are definitely tipping points, and we are, I think, really that awareness of what ageism is starting to grow exponentially. It's like that. It's like your social media following. Once you have 2 people, it's easier to get 4. Once you have 4, it's easier to get 16, and so on. It's not arithmetic.
Well, you wrote the book in 2016. That's when it came out. I looked at the copyright. And ageism back in 2000, to me, there's been such a growth, not only of it, but of an awareness, not so much as living with ageism, but all this anti-aging, the products and the media that goes out there. And as you've stated many times, aging is not a disease. It's not a sickness. It's something that happens. And what I love is your coining of old people in training.
Yeah, well, that phrase, I always credit a geriatrician named Joanne Lynn for that phrase, but then I promptly appropriated it because so much of ageism is discrimination and bias on the basis of age, and which is both, like all bias, embedded in systems around us and carried around between our ears. We live in a world that encourages us to not think about aging, to work really hard to erase its signs from our language, from our appearance. And that denial is how it sinks its hooks into us, because everyone is waking up a day older. So the idea behind becoming an old person in training is just, it's a little trick of the mind. It's to acknowledge that someday, if you're lucky, you're going to get old. And that older you, it's hard to imagine being old. It's impossible when you're a kid. And we're not good at it as a species. We're not good at anticipating. We're not good at planning. But if you can just acknowledge that she's out there, she can be a dot on the horizon as far away as you need her to be. But if you acknowledge that, it helps you sort of slip the noose. You get off this hamster wheel of age denial. So you start looking at older people around you instead of past us, right? And thinking, oh, I like the way they did that thing. Oh, I hope I don't do that when I'm older. And it helps you to sort of build up a bank of information that is useful to you as you move through life, and you stop wasting so much energy pretending that it's never going to happen to you and imagining that it's all going to be awful. because it's not often.
Well, that's the thing, and it's portrayed. I mean, we're portrayed as we're going to be decrepit, or we're going to be debilitated. We're going to cognitively lose it, and that's not so. It's more the anxiety.
Physical decline is inevitable.
Yeah.
Our bodies work less well, which is why there's so many directions to go in always, but which is why the whole discourse around active aging is problematic. You cannot be as active as you were when you were younger, even if you are an athlete. You can stay as active as possible. You can stay as healthy as possible, right? But your body works less well. Cognitive decline is not inevitable. We all know some of those really, smart 90-year-olds who are as sharp as they were at 9. One where ageism enters in, and I love this data, is the way the bigger topic is how attitudes towards aging affect our health, affect how our minds and bodies function. And most of the work is done by this terrific scholar at Yale named Becca Levy. And one of her studies shows that people with more positive attitudes towards aging, and I like to say more realistic attitudes towards aging, because we need to address the scary stuff too. And Alzheimer's is terrifying. They're real things to worry about. But people with more realistic and therefore positive attitudes towards aging are less likely to develop Alzheimer's, wait for it, even if they have the gene that predisposes them to the disease. The fear, the panic that, and we've all felt it, no judgment, I can't find my glasses. What if that is the first sign that I am, that my brain is really going? That anxiety, that stress, that's bad for you. It sets you up for exactly what you fear, right? It actually makes you physically more vulnerable. If you go, crap, I lost my glasses again. I mean, I lose my phone 10 times a day. It drives me nuts. I don't think it means I have Alzheimer's. I do think it means I have some forgetfulness, some of which is tied to age. But guess what? Kids forget things too all the time.
But that's the thing, and that's what we don't focus on.
Yeah, it's the gag in my TED Talk. I say when I lost the car keys in college, I didn't call it a junior moment.
Thank you. And it is an attitude. Yes, health has huge impact, and not everyone's going to be healthy. And there are certain things that are going to happen in life, but it's how you approach it. And we see so many things that our age goes that says we're supposed to forget things. We're supposed to kind of lose it. And so most people fall into that acceptance of, well, they said this was going to happen. So, and I am this old and I'm old, and therefore it was supposed to happen. So it's happened. So then it just feeds into more and more forgetfulness. And
if we think that things are necessarily age related, we might accept, things, conditions as untreatable, like pain, it's true. We do get achier as we get older, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look into why something hurts. And it doesn't mean that your pain because you're older is any harder to treat. I mean, depending on the cause, but
exactly.
But age alone is never a reason. I mean, I remember vividly a story. The New York Times Magazine has a monthly column on like weird diseases, which I happen to love. And one was a guy in his 30s who had it turned out to be some strange autoimmune disease, but he literally almost died because he said to himself, well, these aches and pains, I'm getting older, and this is just what I expect. And he almost didn't get treated and died because he thought that in his 30s, just what happened when you got old.
And you're hitting right on we'll get onto the medical industry. You go to a doctor, and if you're over a certain age, the first thing they ask you, I think it's over 65, the first thing they ask you is, have you fallen recently? It's the first question. Whether you
Well,
go to any doctor, have you fallen recently? And then the thing is that for some people, if they say yes or whatnot, sometimes the response is, well, you know, that's going to happen because you're 60, you're 65, you're 70, because you're old, so you'll trip and fall. And it's not so.
you know, I will push back a little bit in
Okay.
that falls are as we get older, for sure, your balance works less well.
Yes.
And falls are an indicator of frailty, which is the most common condition associated with advancing age and the most treatable. So if you have fallen, I'm with you. You know, it's not the first thing I want to hear,
How
but
about how's your balance?
how's your balance is
Because
better.
you could
Right.
not have balance and not have fallen, but if somebody were to ask you that question, you could say, I went to get up and I moved and I had to hold on because all of a sudden I was unbalanced. Which
Yeah.
really
I mean,
hits more than just have you fallen?
there is a better way to ask it. Definitely. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but a really good indicator of just, one of those quick things that a good doctor looking at you can tell a lot of things, is do you get up from a chair without using your arms? Can you? I mean,
Very
my
good.
balance is nowhere near as good as it used to be. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I fell on the street yesterday. I was jaywalking, which I'm always doing. And there was a lump in the tarmac that I didn't see. If I'd been in the crosswalk, I wouldn't have. But, I do go to physical therapy. And one of the things she says is heel toe. If I was paying more attention, and I wasn't like reading or looking at my phone, and it wasn't a stream of traffic, but I felt like a dope and I have a bruise on my knee. If you put your heel down first, you generally are not going to catch your toe on things, but the risk does increase with age. But it is, in speaking of the medical situation, doctors are ageist. The medical industry is hugely ageist. I would like a patient's age to be on page 2 of our medical records. I'd like it to be on page 2 of our dating sites, right?
Dating site. That's another thing.
I'd like people to make an impression of me based on a picture that actually looks like me, based on actual me in the waiting room, and then find out how old I am, because the minute we have an age, and this is true of all of us, not just, 25-year-old doctors, that the minute we have a number, all sorts of associations and assumptions click into place.
Very true. And the thing is, then we feed into that. We're looking at professionals who are supposed to be the people that we trust, and they really haven't been trained on the fact that not all 70-year-olds are the same. Not all 60-year-olds are the same. Not all 50-year-olds are the same. You can't put it into a bucket.
Not only are we not the same, sometimes I think if there was one fact I could put in every brain in the world, it would be this. Heterogeneity, right? Diversity increases with age, right? Every newborn is unique, but 17-year-olds are way more alike physically, developmentally, socially, cognitively than 37-year-olds, who are way more alike than 50-year-olds, and so on out. The way doctors put it, and I have heard them say it and seen it published, if you've seen one 80-year-old, you've seen one 80-year-old, because
that's
other
right.
80-year-olds who are going to be able to do things that one octogenarian cannot, and there'll be other 50-year-olds who can't do the thing that 80-year-old can do. The older we are, the less our age reveals about us.
Exactly. One of the women that I have spoken to is she was turning 93 years old, Persis. And I spoke to her the day before she was turning, before her birthday. She had just rented a new car. She goes walking 2 miles every day. Now she splits it, a mile in the morning, a mile in the afternoon. And she parks her car and she says she pops her trunk. She takes out her red wheelie, her walker, and she doesn't, she does it. And she feels so bad for all the people who are, it's a stigma to be seen with a walker, with a cane, with, and her quality of life is fantastic because she's not letting her age stop her. Not that, not the fact that she's 93,
I would
she doesn't want anyone to see her.
I'd qualify that slightly, Sylvia. She's not letting her disability stop her,
Yes. Thank
right?
you. Thank you.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I've been thinking more and more, and I've written about it, the intersection of ageism, which is bias on the basis of age, and ableism,
Yep.
which is stigma and discrimination around how our minds and bodies work. And a lot of what we think of is ageism. Most people's biggest fear about getting older is how their minds or bodies might work less well. And that, again, it's age related. Stuff works less well in your body, but it's not age dependent, right? Plenty of people are born with a disability, right? And you can become disabled when you're, God forbid, in a car accident, or temporarily disabled. There's a phrase for that disabled people use for the rest of us, which is TAB, temporarily able-bodied. If we live long enough, we've all experienced incapacity, and we will age into some kind of disability. And one of the big jobs ahead of us is to do exactly what you referenced with your friend. It's like, get rid of this stigma, work against it. It's hard, slow work, but there are so many people who literally never leave home rather than use a walker or a wheelchair because the stigma is so great. Doctors say, people who get MS and their doctor says, please use a cane, and they won't do it, and they fall, and then they do run the risk of a injury that'll really set them back.
Well, I had to have a hip replacement back in 2014. So we're talking 10 years ago. And at first, and it's because of bad arthritis, that had nothing to do with anything else. And at first I was hesitant to say anything. I said, well, there's something with my hip, because I thought only old people get it done. And I realized there are a lot of young people, athletes who need to get it done. And basically after that, I was telling everyone, because it was the best thing. I was walking like I was 150, 200 years old. And then it was the best thing I ever had done. Why?
How did it feel to go? Did you have to use a cane for a while?
No. Oh, I almost tripped with a cane. I was supposed to, but that coordination doesn't work. At the beginning when I was home, I was supposed to use a walker. So I did in the house. And then all of a sudden, get up, I walk, I go, oh my word, I left the walker in the middle of the room. How am I getting back? Because I was afraid of not doing everything the way they said. But within 4 days, I was out there driving, and, it was fine. And it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, I had a total shoulder replacement a year and a half ago. Also arthritis. Really, really glad I did it. My husband had dual hip replacement because he played so much ice hockey in school. He wore hips by the time he was 35.
It was sports related. It was something he did when not everything has to do with age, and we have that stigma.
And there should be no shame about it being age related. That's the other side of the coin, as I know you know.
Exactly. I mean, there are certain things that just happen. And it's not that it's a shame. We just have to be open to the fact that, so we do things a little bit differently.
What was helpful to me in this, thinking about this, was a being reminded by a friend who works with people with disabilities that we used to not talk about having cancer. There was shame and stigma around it. You did not mention it. So imagine having, having to cope with having a cancer diagnosis and having stigma and shame and having to keep it a secret. So, that's a really good example of how the culture changes, and we can change it around these other things if enough of us, change the way we think and talk about it.
Exactly. We're told that we're supposed to look a certain way. We're supposed to act a certain way. We're supposed to dress a certain way. And
Women.
It's just, women, it's women. I'm sorry. It's really, it's women, because, men can get up, they can shower, they can just comb their hair and throw on clothes, and that's it. But we're supposed to act. Everything says the minute somebody doesn't act the way they're supposed to, that society says, they're called out on it. It's absurd. And the magazines that have, this is what you wear when you're 50. This is what you wear when you're 60, give me a break.
No,
It's
that's
just,
just like,
it's horrible. And then you have the beauty industry with all of these anti-aging things that people wind up spending thousands and thousands of dollars to try to regain their youth, to try to stop something that is a natural existence in life. Every day we are a day older.
yeah.
And
You know, and the important thing is to look at what's behind the messages. Who profits from our fears, right? The idea that, wrinkles are not natural and are a problem that needs to be treated comes from a capitalist, sexist, profit-driven, really, punitive beauty culture, because no one makes money off satisfaction. So they invent this problem and then sell you expensive stuff to fix it or cure it. And what is that terrible problem? Looking your age.
we don't know what that is. And
Well,
that's
there's
the
no such
thing.
thing as looking your age.
Right. We
No.
look the way we look. When somebody says you don't look your age, what are they
What age
talking
could you
about?
possibly look besides your own?
Exactly. So that to me is, it's just a saying that people say for, I don't know what reason, because we don't know what we're supposed to look like.
There
I've
is
mentioned
no,
before, back in the 50s, the way women dressed, they looked much more mature, much older. A 16-year-old you would think was in their 20s, because of the way they were supposed to dress. So we've lost the ability really to tell how old somebody is, and that's a good thing to have lost. But we have to stop saying you don't look your age.
yeah.
Is it cute? Who wants to be cute? It's cute, and it's not a true compliment in the way that people think it is. Because again, what are you
It
supposed
comes
to
at
look
the
like?
expense of other women,
Yes, it does.
you know.
Yes, it does. One of the things I want to talk about is the independence trap and isolation. Can you start the conversation on that?
Well, I'm curious. You start with why you think it's an important topic, and then I'll go off that.
Because because there are so many people who think that older people who are alone are lonely and are in desperate need of something. And a lot of older people are afraid to go out because, again, the stigma of being old. And so therefore, being independent is great, but you can't isolate yourself because you need socialization, you need family, you need to be around other people of all ages,
Yeah,
and not just people your age.
people of all ages,
That's right.
ideally.
Yes, all ages.
I mean, when I first started this, if you had asked me what was the most important component of aging well, I would have said health, which it is not. And as we've already touched on, health is, you are not healthy or unhealthy. No one reaches their 60s and 70s without wrangling some kind of health conditions. Then I would have said money. The answer is social networks. They are the most important component of satisfying life at any age. They are especially important as we age because our social circles tend to shrink, especially for men as they leave the workforce, although I think that gender distinction is probably not going to be accurate in another 10 or 20 years. And because people we've known all our lives die. So that's one reason. That's a super pragmatic reason to make friends of all ages. We live in a really age segregated society. Another reason is that making a younger or older friend is itself an anti-ageist act. It shouldn't be a radical act, but in a really age segregated society, it is. And the easiest way to do it is to think of something you like to do and find a mixed age group to do it with. And another thing you can do is to try and break the habit. We all have it, no judgment, of heading for people your own age when you come to a party, when you organize a dinner party, when you show up at a social event. I think especially if we're older, because we have internalized this notion that, older is less desirable. And for legitimately, we live in a youth-centric, youth-obsessed society. Oh, those younger people won't want me to go talk to them. I won't be welcome. Well, that's almost never the case. And if it is, it's not because those people are young, it's because they're jerks. Most people are not jerks, in a casual social situation. You may or may not like them. They may or may not like you, but it's not going to be because of how old you are. It's going to be because you find something of interest to talk about, or you find something of interest, similar values or similar interests. And those are much less determined by age than we think they are.
Well, one of the other things that is out there is that there's an expiration date on how old somebody is when they're still interested in sex.
Yeah. Well, they're finally starting. One of the reasons there was that assumption is they didn't used to study the sex lives of older people. And they are starting to do that. And all data shows that, guess what? People keep doing it, assuming they can find someone to be intimate with. I think it's important to frame this conversation in an understanding that, sometimes being sexually active can be a sort of a marker, a, flag to plant. I'm still driving at night. I'm still getting laid. I'm still, batting, 300, whatever. And there are lots of things we cannot do the way we used to. And there are lots of we decide we don't want to. A lot of women in particular are widowed and are uncomfortable or anxious about putting themselves out into the dating world again, etc. So no shade whatsoever on people who have decided that they do not, that being sexually active is no longer a priority. But if sex matters to you, and if you can accept a broader notion of what sex is, right? If you're not hung up on, the sex of most straight porn and the sex of our 20s. I don't know about you. I do not miss the sex of my 20s.
No.
we get better at sex.
You got it.
You can continue to be sexually active. And for, I often suggest to in a heterosexual context that older women consider dating younger men. There are loads of younger men who are delighted by the prospect of having a lover who is sexually experienced, does not want to start a family, and is perhaps a little more independent, might be less threatened than someone their own age, right? And you can have a lot of fun. It takes courage.
It does take courage. It takes a lot of courage.
But those men are out there, and unless you want to start a family or you want to engage in extreme sports, which are really pretty much the only domain where yes, there's an 80-year-old who climbed Everest, but by and large, those are the only two arenas where age alone, prevents you from being compatible.
So, what more are we going to do to fight this battle against ageism?
Well, culture change is slow, but it is real. It is well underway. I want people to, my book is not free, but it is a good read. And it will let you explain what we're up enough and give you a million suggestions. What is free, what are free are almost all the resources except the books on a website called Old School, which I started with two colleagues. And it's the Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse, and it has hundreds of free resources that we carefully curate to educate people about ageism and what we can do to get rid of it. oldschool.info. So noodle around. It's searchable by topic. If you want an infographic, we got it. If you got a long webinar with a bunch of scientists, we got it. But the most the most essential first step. It's really, it takes a million voices to change the culture. And we are doing it. And if you want evidence, look at the campaigns section of Old School, which didn't even exist when we started it, 6 years ago. And now there's over 30, right? But all change, as the saying goes, starts within, starts between our ears. And the first most important step is to confront our own bias, because we can't challenge something if we're not aware of it. Most bias is unconscious, and most of these are new ideas to people. So think about how you feel about age and aging. Anytime you have a thought that crops up, stop for a second if you can. You can't do it every time, or you see an advertisement, whatever. You see one of those horrible birthday cards. You hear a best friend say, "Oh, what can I expect at my age?" Stop, and question it. And when you get a little, question it in yourself, first of all. And when you get better at catching it in yourself, if a friend, next time someone says, "Hey there, young lady," or, I'm too old for that. Say, "What do you mean? What do you mean by that?" Let's think about that. Not in a gotcha way, not in a, "I used to do that and now I don't, so I'm so perfect" kind of way. But what do you mean by that, right? What does old feel like? Well, old might feel like invisible. Old might feel achy. But then let's say I feel achy. Let's say
Exactly.
I feel invisible. And let's look at the actual feeling or emotion or action, because those things can happen to us at any age. I felt more ugly and invisible at 13 than I ever have since. And then once that shifts in you, because it's like a switch. My favorite comment about my book, and it's, it's not fun. It's never fun to realize we hold bias, but people say, "Oh gosh, I had no idea how ageist I was." But that is like letting a genie out of a bottle, because once you
Exactly.
see, right? I see you nodding, once you see,
I'm with you. I mean,
yeah,
my
I'd love you to describe this process in yourself, because once you see it in yourself, it liberates you to see it in the world. And then it becomes something we can come together and do something about.
I don't want to go backwards. I don't think 40 is the new 30 and yada, yada, yada.
When did you drink the Kool-Aid?
In my 50s, I started finding myself. In my 60s, I didn't stop talking. And now in my 70s, as I said, in my 60s, I threw myself a surprise party. In my 70s, I had another party celebrating, because to me, every day is a celebration. And, shout it out from the rooftop. We have to stop this perception we have of who we're supposed to be. I mean, first, as women, we're supposed to be this, this, and this. And then as a society, as we age, we're supposed to act this way, that way, and however. It's going to take time, but with
And
people like
always
you,
now, look at where the voices come from, where the forces come from that say we should be quiet, right? That say we should dress and behave in ways that please others, right?
please others.
Yeah, yeah.
Before I let you go, one of the things that I do want to mention is that you, in 2022, was named one of 50 leaders working to transform the world to be a better place to grow older by the UN's Decade of Healthy Aging platform, which is the collaboration between the WHO. Ashton, thank you so much for joining me today. This is a topic where we have to continue talking about. Just like any other ism, ageism stops people from enjoying where they are, where they've been, where they've gotten, and where they're going to be going. I mean, it's just, we're there. So, Ashton, you mentioned Old School. Is there any other place you want to direct people to, or is that the best website?
No, Old School is not my website, although I am a co-creator. I make no money unless you buy my book off that site. I make no money. Old School, it is, believe me, a nonprofit. You can find, my website is thischairrocks.com. It links to a Q&A blog that I run called Yo, Is This Ageist?, where you can ask me questions about things you've seen or heard or maybe done. And you can follow me on social media at This Chair Rocks. I'm easy to find.
And This Chair Does Rock, Manifesto Against Ageism. Again, Ashton, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
You can find us on all of your popular podcast platforms. And of course, our website, sylviaandme.com. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, stay tuned.